Welcome to The Jewish Lens, a podcast to discuss anything and everything from a Jewish perspective. Now, please help me welcome the man who controls the media, your host, Jonathan Rosen.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of The Jewish Lens. I'm Jonathan Rosen, and today I am thrilled to welcome an award-winning filmmaker whose movies include When Do We Eat?, Saving Lincoln, and his most recent one, Guns and Moses. He's the author of the Jewish joke collection, Let My People Laugh. He's a social media influencer with over 1 million followers on his Accidental Talmudist account. Please help me welcome Sal Litvak. Sal, thanks so much for joining me today.
Great to be with you, Jonathan.
Well, we have a lot to cover, but I always like to start by going back with people. So you were born in Santiago, Chile. I'm fascinated by this because I come from a Mexican family, and Mexico has a large contingent of concentrated Jewish population. So I'm just curious, how much do you remember of life there? What's the Jewish community like in Chile? Large, concentrated in one area?
It's mostly in Santiago. I left when I was 5, but I've been back a bunch of times. We definitely, I'm familiar with it because we still have family there.
Oh, good.
And it's it's small but tight knit and very social. People just go to each other's homes and have un tecito, a cup of tea. People sing songs. They just really enjoy each other's company. We left that and came to the United States where, everything is so large and widespread. And that was a bit of a culture shock for my parents. Luckily, we had my grandmother, who I was always very close to, who lived with us. Yeah, so we had some extended family in the home. And I miss it. I mean, Spanish is my first language.
So you're still fluent. I mean, you still remember everything Spanish-wise.
Yeah. I'm fluent in Spanish, although my vocabulary in English is quite a bit larger than in Spanish. So people have said to me, you sound like an 80-year-old grandmother when you speak Spanish. And that's because that's who I mostly spoke with when I was speaking in Spanish.
like in my Spanish, I could probably get by now, but it's not good by any means, but it's, it's passable. So I know I can get to where I'm going. So I was reading, speaking of your grandparents, so you're the grandson of Holocaust survivors. So when did they go to Chile? Was it immediately after the war? And why there?
So on my mother's side, she was Hungarian. She was a survivor. My grandmother carried my mother as an infant through a concentration camp.
Oh, wow.
Absolute miracle story. My grandfather, my grandmother's husband, was murdered in a different camp. He was taken away while my grandmother was pregnant, so he never met my mom. My mom never met her dad. She was an orphan, as far as her father was concerned, as soon as she was born. And then after the war, they went from their small town of Kartsag to Budapest. And then, obviously it was not as bad in Soviet Hungary as it was in Nazi Hungary. Sure. But it wasn't so much better either. And they were finally able to get out in 1956. And why did they go to Chile? Because a Hungarian relative had gone there. Why did he go there? We don't know. Why did the first Hungarian Jewish pioneer, so to speak, end up in Santiago? But then a little Hungarian Jewish community formed in Santiago, and they joined that. And on my father's side, it was from Ukraine. And they were fleeing the pogroms around 1905. And again, why they ended up in Chile, we don't know. But that's where they were.
That's incredible. I mean, I've had other people who, descendants of survivors, and it's always mixed with regard to how open their family was. Like some would talk about their family, about their experiences, and some never wanted to discuss it at all. So how was your family with that? Did they discuss what happened to them?
No. My grandmother would not talk about it. Whenever there was a Holocaust program on TV, she and my mother would watch it, almost like it was their duty to watch it and sit there weeping. Wow. But they wouldn't talk about it. There were pictures of my grandfather in the house. And there was this specter of the Holocaust over our home. And so the ideas of never again, that in our house you could not own a German product, no German toaster oven, no German car, nothing like that. And this idea that no matter how safe and secure you think you are, it could happen anywhere. And we always said, okay, we understand what you're saying. Europe, But America, it could never happen in America. And I'm not saying that today we're in 1930s Germany, but the threat level to Jews in America, attacks obviously that are happening in the UK and in France, in Europe once again, but even in America, I mean, a guy in Teaneck was beat up on his front yard putting up his sukkah last week. We've never seen anything like this. It's like we had an 80-year respite from overt, brazen, proud Jew hatred. And that's over. These people feel perfectly comfortable shouting it from the rooftops.
Yeah, it's become socially acceptable. That's the issue right now.
Exactly. And I think it would not have surprised my grandmother. And she and her sister and their two brothers, they all survived. 4 siblings actually survived the Holocaust, each taking a different path through it. She was in a concentration camp. One of them escaped from Hungary, got to England. Another one was hidden by a friend in Budapest, and another sibling was on the run with her son and ended up hiding on a farm. And she had saved up goose fat during 1944 when everyone was poor and starving, and she just knew that this huge bucket of goose fat would become valuable. And so my grandmother's sister was actually able to trade that with a farmer for passage in a horse-drawn cart and hiding in a barn in the last months of the war in Hungary. So all kinds of stories.
I know, first of all, I totally agree with you. I also used to say that, never here. I'm not worried about it here. And the last, year or so, I said, I am worried. I'm worried about a lot of things there. But you have also one book out, which we're going to discuss also. But hearing your life story, your family story, there's a book right there. I mean, all these experiences.
Yes. And it was very much, I was very close with my grandmother, and really her presence in my life, and her death completely redirected my life. So, I was not religious growing up. I did go to Hebrew school 3 days a week. I had a bar mitzvah at a conservative synagogue, and then I was pretty much done. It seemed like a chore. I was not very connected. We're basically high holiday Jews. We would have a Seder. We would go to synagogue on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. Culturally, of course, very strongly Jewish and Zionistic, but really not connected to Torah religiously. My grandmother she was very private. She didn't read Hebrew, but she had a little Hungarian siddur, a prayer book, and I would see her praying from it, by herself in her bedroom at night. It was an impression that was strong with me. And, while there were many people who lost spouses in the Holocaust and afterwards remarried and started families again, for her, there was only her husband. Her name was Magda. He was Imre. It was one of these great love stories. And it was something we just knew about her, that she was waiting to be reunited with her Imre, her Beshert, her soulmate, in the next world. And so, she wasn't in a hurry, and she sounds saintly, and she was, but she was also hilariously funny. We had so much fun, and the Hungarian cooking was such an important part of my youth and growing up. And then I would go back and visit after I moved away. But in 1997, when she was 88, I was already living in Los Angeles. And, in the end, there was a melanoma that metastasized, and my mom said, "Come home." And we were at her bedside. I was in a chair like this, holding her hands. My mom was next to me, my brother. We were all holding her hands and telling her how much we loved her, and that, she could be at peace. And her breathing became very labored. And then, this isn't always the case, but that time she took her last breath, and we knew she took her last breath. And so we're all crying. And, my mom is tearing our garments in the Jewish custom. And then something pulled my attention away from her face and to the middle of the room. And it was like the air shimmered, and then something opened. And it was like I was looking through this opening, and I saw her moving away from me towards someone, and there was my grandfather. that I
Oh, wow.
recognized from the photographs in my house. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what she's been waiting for 53 years. I can't believe I'm seeing this. And the weird thing was, she didn't want to go. And I'm like, why doesn't she want to go? And then I got it. She was embarrassed. He was this young, handsome man she last saw in 1943. And she feels like an old lady. And he reached out and took her hands and pulled her to him. They embraced. It got very bright. Then she was young again. And it was this joy and love drenched moment. And then it got really bright and they were gone. And I'm there with my mouth hanging open. And like, I didn't know what to make of this. I'm not a person who sees things. I never saw anything like that. But I was so transfixed and moved. And when I got back to LA, I just wanted to honor her. And I went to a synagogue to say Kaddish, the kind of big conservative synagogue that I grew up in. And I was very moved that day. And that rabbi was a very gifted orator and teacher. And I'd always been very spiritual. I always believed in God. I just, sadly, the Judaism I'd been exposed to as a kid was just not very spiritual. Mm-hmm. And so now I started finding teachers that I could connect with and learning Torah and learning the tradition. And hearing about the Talmud, our oral tradition, which I was always very curious about. And slowly but steadily but surely, I just became more and more connected as a Jew with Judaism, with our tradition.
So your grandmother's passing is what made you want to embrace the religion more? Yes.
It's what sparked it. It's really what triggered that journey to begin. My wife, I had just met her. We weren't married yet, but we were, we become a couple, and we were on this journey together. And over the years, we did get married, and we just, slowly became more and more connected to the Jewish community. And like I mentioned, that I became curious about the Talmud, because every rabbi who teaches anything will mention the Talmud. I didn't know what it was. Whenever I go to a Judaica store to get a prayer book or a gift for somebody or something, I would see the volumes of Talmud, which is, for people who remember the Encyclopedia Britannica, which was 23 volumes, the Wisdom of Humanity. This is 73 volumes, the Wisdom of the Jews, the Art Scroll Talmud. And I think, well, okay, I'm sure there's full of wisdom. It must be fascinating, but I wouldn't know where to begin. I didn't go to yeshiva. I don't even know if I'm allowed to read those books. And I would walk away intimidated and repeat probably a dozen times between 97, when she died, and 2005. When I was in that store again, it's called the Mitzvah Store here in Los Angeles on Pico Boulevard. It was then on Pico Boulevard. And I started to walk away, intimidated. I guess it's not for me. I don't speak Hebrew. I didn't go to yeshiva. And then something stopped me. And I thought, this is ridiculous. They're just books. There must be a book one of the Talmud. I'll just get that and see what it's like. I found book one. I took it to the counter, and the kid at the register says, oh, you're doing Daf Yomi. So I said, what's Daf Yomi? And he looked at me really funny, like this, pulled his glasses down to the bridge of his nose, looking at me like, are you kidding? And I thought, oh man, Daf Yomi must be a code. Must be a code. Like, if you don't know this code, you're not allowed to read these books. Now he's got to get rid of me without embarrassing me. So awkward. He says Daf Yomi means page of the day, and it refers to a program where people around the world read the entire Talmud, one page a day, everybody on the same schedule, and it takes 7.5 years. And today, that day, is day one. Now, this would have been amazing if it was month one of a 7.5 year cycle. It would have been incredible if it was week one. But in fact, it was day one of a 7.5 year cycle. So when God wants you to get a message, he sends it loud and clear. And I said, okay, wow. Got to get the message. I guess I'm doing Daf Yomi. Now, a lot of people start Daf Yomi and they have a black hat and a long beard. They went to yeshiva. And they have all that background, and they don't finish because it's such a big commitment. It's about an hour a day. every day, 7 days a week for 7.5 years. But I felt like God put the book in my hand. I stayed with it. In the beginning, it was very difficult. Everything was so unfamiliar. But over time, I got used to the jargon of the Talmud. And I was able to, as they say, complete Shas, complete that journey 7.5 years later in 2012. And I went to what's called the Siyum HaShas, this celebration of people completing the Daf Yomi cycle. It's done all over the world, but the one in New York is a giant stadium with 93,000 Jews singing and dancing a hor and celebrating our unbroken wisdom tradition stretching back to Mount Sinai. Couldn't help but think of those Nazis that filled stadiums celebrating they're going to burn our books and burn us. And those bastards gone from this world. And here we are, the tradition unbroken. And I started... basically, at first it was a column in the Jewish Journal called Accidental Talmudist, writing about what I had learned, what it was
Absolutely
exciting to me in the Jewish tradition.
Yes.
Thank you. And then to promote that column, my wife and I, who had learned something about social media from promoting our second movie, Saving Lincoln, started a Facebook page, Accidental Talmudist. And there we could share not just 800-word column once a week, but whatever excited us, whether it was a meme or music or a song or a prayer or a thought. I never would have expected, but an audience kind of grew and grew and grew and gathered around us. And that's how we come to today, to running our nonprofit.
But I'll discuss it now. I'll come back to your family life in a minute then, since we're talking about this now. How long did it take you? I mean, first of all, it was like amazing to me that, what made you decide to focus on the social media page dedicated to Talmud? Right? That's just amazing to me. But how long did it take you to see that you were onto something, that the account was growing to these huge numbers?
Pretty quickly, it was growing faster than our page had grown for Saving Lincoln. So we could see that we were tapping into something. And in those early months, when we'd reach 10,000 followers, we celebrated, and here's our 10,000 follower, and then 20,000, 30,000, 40,000. And then we thought, it's just going to peter out. I mean, how many people are going to really be interested in this? Maybe 40, 50,000, that'd be incredible. But it just kept growing and growing and growing. And, and then we had to feed it, had to keep creating content. People, wanted to support our efforts. We didn't even have a nonprofit, to receive donations. Eventually we created that. We created a very rich and full website with so much information about Torah, about all the different Torah portions. And like rabbis have always done, who, so traditional to open with a joke. So I started sharing the greatest Jewish jokes. I would always rewrite them, to make them modern and be as, the funniest version of it to my ear. So in the beginning, we were sharing the jokes in writing. And then at a certain point, I just started telling them. And so many of the jokes went viral that eventually Skyhorse Publishing came to me and said, let's do a joke book. And that's how Let My People Laugh came to be. I'm an accidental humorist, an accidental comedian.
I'm going to talk about that.
I'm not a comedian. I'm not a comedian. But
I'm published with Skyhorse as well, by the way.
So, very good. Very good. I'll see all the other canceled people.
Right, exactly. So let me go back. Okay, but you also have a podcast dedicated to this, right? You have a podcast dedicated to the...
Yes, and so we started the Accidental Talmudist podcast. I've had a lot of great guests on it, like Alan Dershowitz and Nas Daily, Ross Rothstein, Stan with us, so many other people. Stephen Tobolowsky that aren't even coming to my mind at this moment.
I've interviewed Stephen Tobolowsky. He's a great guy.
He's so funny. He's a great guy. And, that's a nice extended format where we could talk for an hour and go in depth on various issues. I like the jazz, of like what you and I are doing right now. Who knows where the conversation will lead us. I've always felt that a good conversation is one in which both people learn something that neither knew before. So if in our exchange we come up on a new idea, how wonderful that would be.
Well, I'm amazed at some. I'll go back to some things that you said before. I'll come back to the book because I had a very similar experience when my grandmother passed, and that's why I was amazed to hear your story. Because when my grandmother passed that same night, and I say this all the time for the life, no one ever believes it. I saw her. She came to my bedside, like, I felt like a presence. I came to my bedside and I turned, and there she is, as first, like, as the sickly old woman who just died. And then the next thing I know, she's young and reaching to me, and touching my face, like smiling, like letting me know like everything's okay. And
Wow.
and then that's it. She like disappeared. But it's like that has stayed with me always, that there she was. And like I said, I don't care if anyone believes me ever. I know what happened. I felt it. I saw
Jonathan,
it.
that is 100% real. And I want to tell you something else about that. The way I told the story to you today,
Yeah.
like this is what I saw, right? The way I used to tell it in the early years, as I became a little bit of a public figure as Accidental Talmudist, I would be asked to come and give talks. And in those early years, I would always tell the story. I'm sure it was my imagination, but, right? And then I would say what I saw.
Right.
And I was once speaking at a Jewish Learning Conference in Melbourne, Australia. I told it that way. And afterward, a woman came up to me and said, "Did you see it?" I said, "Well, I mean, yeah, it was very vivid, but did you see it?"
Right.
Yes, I saw it. Then own it.
Yeah.
Because so many people have had these experiences, just like you described, John. So many people have had experiences like this. And it's exactly that. People will think I'm crazy. So they keep it to themselves. They don't really believe it's real. They don't want to give credence to it. It's supernatural. And yet it's so incredibly, I won't say common, because it's not everybody.
Sure.
But there are so many examples of it, much more than people would think. I often ask people when they lose a very close relative, some people see things because they're more visual people. Some people have a different kind of experience. But did anything happen having to do with electricity? People are like, yeah, there was this weird thing. The lights blinked, or the bed moved, or the coffee maker went on for no reason. So many people have stories like that. And why wouldn't they? We don't have souls. We are souls.
Yeah.
We have bodies. We come from a place of eternity. We return to a place of eternity. That is all real. It's absolutely real. And we spend much more time there than we spend here.
Your story just like hit me because of that. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Let me go back a second, because you were talking about growing up. You grew up in Riverdale, and I know Riverdale well. I had a very good family friend that grew up around there. I just like, what made your family first leave Chile to go to the United States? What prompted them to go and say, well, and also go to Riverdale?
In 1970, the Chilean people elected a communist president, Salvador Allende. Mm-hmm. And the Hungarian side of the family said, yeah, we've seen this story before. We know how it ends. Right. We're out. I mean, it was really as simple as that. My father was quite, in his youth, sympathetic to the communist ideal, and that it's just going to be great. It's a revolution. It's going to be so good for the poor people. But he was a kind of very gifted intellectually. Had been very successful as an engineering student at the university. And now was just a very young engineer, and also had a little business on the side, developing some property with a relative. And so a guy in the new government, high up, like a minister, in this new government, calls him up and says, I got this position. And my father's like, okay, this guy's 2 years older than me. He was like the head of the communist club in the university. And now he's like the minister of the interior. And he's calling my dad to say, yeah, and I'd like you to be the undersecretary of, the road system or something. Like the kind of job that you would only get after 30 years in the field. Right. And my father says, why are you calling me? I'm totally unqualified to do that. And the guy says, well, we don't have anybody. We need like really intelligent people to come and help run this government. And my father gets off the phone and says, okay, we're leaving. This government has no chance to succeed. They have no idea what they're doing. And, sure enough, 3 years later, it fell. But in the meantime, we were gone. And we ended up in New York. I don't know why they moved to Riverdale. I think it was just kind of, inexpensive compared to Manhattan. We only lived there for 3 years, and then we moved to the suburbs, to Rockland County, to New City, New York. That's where I grew up.
I know you can't tell from the accent, but also fellow New Yorker, but
Okay.
From Brooklyn. But so you eventually you did all the movies, which I'm going to discuss in a minute. But were you big into movies as a kid too? I mean, were you like a big fan and into like?
I was definitely yes. I was very much a movie lover, and I was talking to somebody recently. For those of us who are old enough, 1977, Star Wars came out.
Sure.
And that was the first time ever I remember going to the movie theater, or being online at the movie theater to go see it. And then the people from the earlier show came out and got back online to see it again. And it was like, wow, that was a real phenomenon. But it was not on my radar that you could become a filmmaker. That was not imaginable to me. When we came to this country, we're immigrants, Jewish immigrants. So definitely you're going to get a big education. And so that means in America, you're going to go to Harvard and you're going to be a doctor. And since I was 5, when they said that to me, I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to Harvard. I'm going to be a doctor. And that was just the plan. It was not really my plan. It was the family plan.
Right.
And luckily I did well in school. And like I said, my family was very into education, and I had the grades, and I went to Harvard. And so I was a pre-med at Harvard, and that I was not into at all. It was just so cutthroat, so difficult, all graded on a bell curve. And, you're just surrounded by geniuses who are so much better than me at, chemistry, organic chemistry, inorganic chemistry, whatever, biology. And I was really enjoying my English literature classes. So I ended up switching to be an English major. At first, I was still going to go to medical school. Then I said, you know what? I'm not going to medical school. So then obviously you're going to law school. It went down in my family. And I was like, well, I don't know if I want to be a lawyer. And my father said, listen, you go to law school, you'll always have that to fall back on. And then you can do whatever you want. He never imagined I would go, finish 3 years of law school and not become a lawyer. But I really heard that message, and I was sort of plotting my escape from this plan the whole time I was in law school.
No, I was going to ask you that. How did your family, your Jewish family that says, oh, you're going to be a lawyer, how did they take that when you said, hey, I really want to go do this instead?
I mean, they still haven't recovered. But I even practiced law for a year and a half. But,
right.
What happened during that period is a friend of mine went to film school.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, film school? What's that? Because at Harvard, I'd gone to like a night of student films, but it had nothing to do with movies you see in a theater. It was like the most pretentious, boring art films, just absolutely unwatchable, like hands kneading dough and cutting fruit for 27 minutes, and call it art. It's like, is that what people do in film school? And my friend's like, no. Film school is like, you go to learn how to make movies that you see in movies. Like, you could do that? Really? And so then I looked into it. I had some loans from law school. So, the top film schools, UCLA was the state school. And I only applied there. They were taking 18 out of 700 applicants. I had no business getting in. But I talked my way in, and thank God I did. And I got into the director's program. And once I got there and started making short films, I was like, "Thank you, God, that I didn't miss this. This is what I was meant to do."
I have to ask quickly, just before we go into the movies. I want to ask about your movies. How were things when you were there? Because Harvard and you went NYU too. I saw they're both like in the news recently for all the wrong reasons. How were things when you were there?
I mean, at Harvard, my time was completely taken up with being a rower. Obviously there's no crew in my high school, my big public high school in New City, New York. But when I got there, I joined the crew team. I ended up rowing for 4 years. We were, at a level of fitness. When I finished Harvard crew, with no further training, I went and ran the New York Marathon. We were just very elite level athletes. And so that really took up all my time. But But politically, I mean, there was no anti-Semitism. It was not on our radar. It's not something that we had to deal with. This was the 1980s. People were concerned with South Africa at that time.
Sure.
But it wasn't like the Vietnam era. So politics were really not that important. Interestingly, when I got to UCLA, which was kind of the early days of extreme, DEI and identity politics. And, I was one of the few people that got into that to learn how to write feature screenplays and make feature films so that I could get out and make a movie that people could see in a movie theater. And that's not, what everyone else was doing necessarily. A lot of people were there to do therapy on themselves, or, I guess some of them to become academics in film, but they weren't like really thinking about filmmaking. It was weird. And there's kind of a story, it's a little bit famous among our friends. I guess I'll share it with you. We had an exercise second year where we were learning how to direct a moving camera. And, to do a scene in 5 minutes with no cuts and the camera's always moving to sort of reframe the actors and create, close-ups and two shots through the choreography of the actors moving, the camera moving. And that's what we're really learning. But so who was acting in the scenes that you were directing? Your fellow directors. So you would act in two scenes and then direct one scene with two of your fellow directors. And so there was one scene where it was my buddy Dave and I, who both happen to be Jewish, and I have this Latino connection we've talked about. And then this woman who was a hack. She really just had no idea what she was doing, but everything for her was identity politics and making some kind of a statement about us, And
I see them publishing all the time, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. And so the scene that she envisioned for us is that we're in prison. My buddy David has just returned from trying to join the Aryan Brotherhood, who beat the crap out of him because they found out he's Jewish. And then rather than interact with him about that, it triggers me to turn to camera and go into a monologue about how I murdered my sister because I'm a light-skinned Latino and she was the dark-skinned one in the family. And so I had to murder her.
Of course.
I mean, it was so dumb, and beyond being dumb, this is what was really offensive about it, is that, at the end of the scene, he's just supposed to lash out at me and call me, you're just a spick. Right? Because I'm Latino, right? So you're just a spick. You're just a red, because I had very bright red hair at that time. You're just a red tomato spick, right? And he just shouts that at me. And so, finished doing this stupid scene. She's standing right next to the camera. The lens is here. It's like right in my face. He's right behind me. He yells that at me. And then I watch her signaling to him like this. Say it again. And so he says it again. You're just a spit. You're a tomato spit. You're just nothing but a fucking red tomato spit. And she makes him yell it at me 30 times. And I can tell you that if I had an African-American woman and a Latina woman, I had the Latina call the African-American woman the N-word 30 times.
Right. Of course.
I would be expelled from UCLA.
Sure. Yeah.
But because she, fits the identity politics profile, she can get away with this. And there were other people in the class who were like, Sal, you can't let her get away with that. That's so offensive. That's outrageous. You have to create an incident, file a report, take her to the administration. I was like, you know what? I could care less. I don't have time for this garbage. I'm here to try. It's so hard to get out and get a movie made. I don't need to be in, some kind of lawsuit or whatever about this. And I just let it go. But it was so indicative of what was going on even 30 years ago.
Amazing.
And that woman, by the way, I'm not going to say where, but I'll tell you that she is now the dean of a film department, teaching the next generation how to direct movies.
It does not shock me whatsoever, and that's so upsetting to hear. But yeah, nothing surprising there for me.
Yeah, nothing, right?
Yeah, no. But let me hear about your production company, Pictures from the Fringe. So you created that. First off, how does someone form a production company?
So, there's no, when I was a lawyer, briefly, just for a year and a half. So your third year of law school, all the law firms come to the law school. They interview the students. They select the ones that they want. They make offers. You join a law firm. You be at that law firm for 7 or 8 years. They probably offer you to be a partner. Like, it's a career track. You go to film school. You finish that. You are qualified to direct a movie or fetch coffee. And fetch coffee is the only job they're offering. So when I got out of film school, those first few years, I was just making ends meet. I was managing a 30-unit building in return for free rent. I was teaching introduction to film and screenwriting at a community college an hour away from LA. I got a job reading scripts at Creative Artists Agency for $40 a script, and covering and telling the agents what's in that script, is it good or bad. Right. And then eventually I was able to turn that into a business of offering to screenwriters what coverage they would get at CAA. From someone like me, they could just submit to me and get that feedback first. Right. Make your script much better before you actually submit it to an agency. But all the while, and by then, Nina and I had met, and then we became a screenwriting team, and then we were writing screenplays, and it really takes, you have to have written probably 5 screenplays before you know what the heck you're doing. And then, and then we had a screenplay that we wanted to, make into a movie, and we formed a production company. Really, what that meant is that we went looking for money, and eventually we found an investor to back us. And now, we had to get that movie made. So I had to find an actual experienced producer who knew how to, hire a crew and make a movie and get a casting director and put it all together. But because I had found the investors, I had final cut, and I've always had final cut. And in all our pictures, because we were becoming Jewishly connected and eventually Orthodox, but even when we weren't Orthodox yet, we didn't shoot on Shabbos, and so we would shoot from Sunday to Thursday, and we had the power to do that. And that's been our path.
Yeah. I've not seen this movie, and I'm dying to see it now because it sounds fantastic. When do we eat? You wrote that to us. Yes. You mentioned Nina Davidovich. It's a Passover comedy. Look at this cast. I mean, for your first film, Leslie Ann Warren, Michael Lerner, Max Greenfield, Sherry Appleby, who I loved in Roswell, and then Jack Klugman. I absolutely love Jack Klugman in his final film. How did you go about getting and assembling the cast? Was that the producer? Or that's something that you did? Who was the first that signed up?
So our producer was Stephen Wolf. He responded to the script, and that we had financing, of course. Right. And then I don't remember how we found Ronnie Yeskel, our casting director. And then, each of the cast members, it was a different route, sort of to the cast. They all responded to the script. That's why they became involved. Jack, we made an offer. Leslie was a friend of Steven's, and she responded to the script. I discovered Max Greenfield. He was nobody before. He auditioned for that role, and I didn't want to give him the part because in his first audition, it was obvious to me that he was really talented and he would do a good job, but there was something in his attitude, like he wasn't, maybe this wasn't a good idea for him. And I was like, what, if you're not thrilled to be here, it's not going to happen. And I said that to my casting director, and that feedback went back to him or his agent or whatever. And then it came back, he was nervous. He's super excited to do this. And he loves that you like him in it. And he wants to show you that he's excited to be in it. So then we called him back and we tested him with a few different actresses for that love scene. Millie Avital is the one who eventually did it with him, and they had tremendous chemistry. That's how he came to it. Ben Feldman, who's also quite famous now, also he auditioned. I discovered him. And so it's just different paths. Michael Lerner, Ronnie brought him to a reading of the script, where we just wanted to hear it read. And she said, you have to try Michael. This is like a big actor, Academy Award nominated actor, who just showed up, to volunteer and read a part at a reading. And I was like, well, he's amazing. He'd be great. No way I'm going to cast him because he looks too much like my dad. And this is not about my family. This highly dysfunctional family is not my family. but he was just so good. There was no way to deny him the part.
What,
And that's how it came down.
how was what was Klugman like?
Such a pro, such a pro. It was a tough shoot because any independent movie is so compressed. A Hollywood movie shooting such a script would do it in 40 to 60 days. We did it in 20. And so the actors, and it was very difficult to shoot a dinner party movie with 11 people at the table because there were so many angles that you had to shoot every time you do a scene. You had to shoot that same scene 20, 30, 40 times just to get the coverage from every angle. And, the young actors would often, put on a strong performance when they're on camera, but kind of phone it in when they're, just being the scene partner for somebody who's on camera and they're off camera. And Jack rebuked them and said, you don't do that. When you're off camera, you have to give just as much energy so that the person who's on camera can interact with that. It's a beautiful, beautiful lesson. And he told so many great, funny stories about how he got into acting. He was running away from a bookie in Philly that he got into trouble with.
Oh, that's great.
He didn't go to college. His buddy had gone to Carnegie Mellon and, ended up crashing on the guy's couch while he's on the run from a bookie. His friend goes to an acting class. Jack has nothing to do. So he goes and he watches these young actors, do a scene. And, in film school, we directed many student actors and most of them are terrible, and anybody could see that. So Jack is in the back row, like going like that, just laughing at these poor performances. And the teacher says, "Who are you?" He says, "I'm Jack." "You think you could do better than these actors down here?" He says, "I couldn't do worse." She says, "Oh, why don't you come down and show us?" And he goes down, he's just reading from a script, and he's just a natural talent, And she says, "Why don't you come back tomorrow?" And so he just kept coming as an auditor to this friend's acting class, who was a student at Carnegie Mellon. And by the end of the term, she says to him, "You're gifted. You need to pursue this." And he ended up going to New York City, getting a room at the Y. His roommate was Charles Bronson, who was getting by selling his blood. That's how he was making ends meet. And both of them became stars. Yeah.
How awesome for you that you get to hear that on your first film. And let me ask you, it is your first film. So how much pressure did you feel that, I have to give direction to Jack Klugman. I have to give direction to Leslie Ann Warren. For all these people doing it a long time, and this is your first time. Did you feel that pressure for yourself?
I felt it very much. It wasn't my first film in the sense that I had made 3 or 4 short films in film school. So, I had heard roll camera, speed,
Right.
quite understand, and I had to say action, and get the performance that I need. But this was a totally different scale. And that very first day, the first scene that we shot, it was like quiet on the set, roll sound, rolling, roll camera, speed. I'm like, I have to say action. Action. It was like, and I was embarrassed, but from then on I was down. And I knew what I wanted, I knew what I needed to get from them. However, When Do We Eat is a comedy, very much a comedy, dysfunctional family comedy, a little edgier than I would probably make if I was directing it today. There's definitely some edgy material in it. It has definitely stood the test of time. We wanted to make the Jewish It's a Wonderful Life that people would watch, every year as Passover approaches, and it became that. It's a cult hit now. But there's a lot of depth in it, both sort of spiritually. We got really into what Passover actually means. Studied, many texts about Passover, especially in Breslov, Hasidic texts about it, kind of the mystical aspects of Passover, but also, what it means to Jews to be in this part of tradition, and the baggage, literally, that we bring to every family gathering. And so Jack Klugman is a Holocaust survivor, And in the middle, where the family is struggling, there's a newly religious kid, Max Greenfield, and he's trying to bring some religious teachings to a totally secular family who is not open to it. And at a certain point, Jack is like, this touchy-feely, me, you, spiritual nonsense. When you talk about God saving you and thanking him for that, you mean it. Because the bastards who wanted us dead, they killed your grandmother, my wife, and my other 3 children. Only one of them survived. And he tells his harrowing tale. And because we were shooting a dinner party movie, we had the luxury that you don't usually have in movies of shooting in sequence, right? Normally you shoot according to availability of actors and locations. And so very often you shoot the last scene of the movie first, then a middle scene, then a 3/4 scene. You're totally out of order. But for all of the material that was at this dinner party, we might as well shoot it in order. And there's a lot of jokes being cracked, but then we go, for about a few minutes of movie time into this very dark place, which was a few days of shooting time. And at that point, when we're in the midst of that, there were some rebellious cast members, let's say. We had, there's one cast member who's not Jewish because she's playing a non-Jew. Everyone else is Jewish. And, got 10 very opinionated Jewish creative people at this table. And several of them are like, I thought we were in a comedy. This is not comedic. This is very dark. What kind of movie are we making? And so then everybody had to be heard.
Of course.
And now, like, the crew is sitting on their hands doing nothing. And, on a set, time is money. But every cast member has to be heard. And this thing is taking 2 hours. I'm dying, just because I'm also a producer. I mean, I know that we have to make our day, and this is terrible. But we also have to work through this so that all the cast is comfortable, understands what we're doing. And I keep explaining to them, we're Jews. In the midst of comedy, there is darkness. And in the midst of darkness, there is comedy. There was black humor literally in the Holocaust. And I knew that, from my grandmother. And so everybody spoke their piece. And then, just as happens in the movie, because in the Seder that they're having, it goes to this very dark place where the family's all at each other's throats. And then the Christian woman, who's a guest at the Seder, just as she does on camera, now behind the camera, in the midst of this 2-hour conversation, she says, "May I say something?" And I'm like, "Please." This is Cinda Williams, incredible actress. And she says, "How many of you have acted in crap movies, crap plays, crap TV shows? I know you all have, because we're actors. I have. This is not crap. This is important. This matters. This is about something real. Family, history, tradition, spirituality, growth. I am so moved to be here. Can we get back to work?" And everybody's like, "Yes, we can. Yes, we can." And that's how it got back to work. And it's just like happens in the movie.
Well, first of all, what's a Jewish movie without 1,000 different opinions?
Yes.
Let me hear about your newest one, Guns N' Moses. Another great title, first of all. Great cast. And my God, you got Christopher Lloyd in it as well. So tell me about the film and where the idea came from.
So Guns N' Moses, it had been a few years since our last film while we were building our Accidental Talmudist platform, where we shared Jewish wisdom and humor with this large audience. So we knew we were going to do a Jewish movie. I wanted to make a thriller because it's my favorite genre. We made a drama, we made a comedy before. Now I wanted to do a thriller. And so Nina and I, my wife, screenwriting partner, we watched a thriller a day for 2 years, really studying the genre, often finding our movies that we're watching from 50 greatest thrillers, 100 greatest thrillers, all these lists of the greatest thrillers. And we wanted to make a movie that could take its place on any such list. So we studied Hitchcock and De Palma and Spielberg, Clouseau, Polanski, all kinds of wonderful directors of thrillers, foreign thrillers, domestic thrillers. And during that period, a couple of things happened. One was I joined an organization called Magen Am, which means Shield of the Nation. By this time, I was an Orthodox Jew, which is to say, a visible Jew. I mean, I walk around in a kippah. When we go to our synagogue on Shabbos or on holidays, we're wearing black suits, black hats. We're visible Jews. And in our community, we've been quite aware for a long time that there's a danger. There's a threat level to Jews in America and all around the world. You hear the stories constantly now coming from Europe, UK, France, but Australia. I mean, Jews have been attacked everywhere. There's actual violent threat to Jews everywhere. And a Chabad rabbi in our community created this organization called Shield of the Nation. And we get licensed to carry firearms, and I carry a firearm when I go to synagogue, and please God, I should never need it.
Right.
But we don't carry cavalierly, like the training that we have to go through is very intense. We have to pass qualifications, more difficult than FBI agents. We're initially licensed for exposed carry, where we're wearing insignia, like actual uniform. We're all volunteers, but we look like security guards. And then most of us have gone and also got concealed carry permits, and now we, just wearing the black suit. But we carry, and we're constantly vigilant and thinking about safety and security of our community. So I had learned to use a firearm, and then there was a shooting at a synagogue in Poway, California in 2019. I drove down, I attended the funeral of Lori Gilbert Kay, who was murdered that day. The rabbi had his fingers shot off by the killer, and I held his bandaged hands and interviewed him for Accidental Talmudist, and then watched him become a national figure in the ensuing days, calling for mitzvahs and calling for charity and calling for good deeds to be done in Lori's memory, so that something decent and righteous and good could come out of that horrific tragedy. We were very moved by that. And so these were the elements that kind of came together. Guns N' Moses is not the story of the Poway shooting, but it does begin with a shooting at a synagogue event. And then a rabbi, a Chabad rabbi, who doesn't know from guns, as his community comes under threat, and as he starts to investigate the crime, because the cops arrest the wrong guy right away. And, they think they have the right guy, but the rabbi just instinctively knows they don't. And so since they won't investigate, he does. And as he gets closer to the true villain, the danger skyrockets, and he and his family, his community are in danger. And so he learns how to shoot. And the firearms training that he goes through in the movie is not the typical, in Hollywood, a guy needs to learn how to shoot. What happens? A few tin cans on a fence, little music, 15 seconds later, he's a dead shot. That's not the real world. It's so difficult to shoot accurately anytime, exponentially more difficult under pressure. And the only way you're going to be able to shoot accurately in such a situation is with reps, like constant repetition and drilling and learning. And that language of firearms training, let the bang surprise you, just add pressure, sight picture, trigger press, proper grip, etc. And so people in the firearms community recognize that in the movie. But anyway, Guns N' Moses is a movie about Jews under attack who fight back. And, was conceived and shot before October 7th. We knew that a movie about Jews under attack who fight back was going to always be relevant. But we never imagined a horror like October 7th, nor this explosion of Jew hatred ever since, which has only made the movie exponentially more relevant, and has created challenges for us. Our movie is an edge-of-your-seat thriller with a big cast. You mentioned Christopher Lloyd, Dermot Mulroney, Neil McDonough. The rabbi's played by Mark Feuerstein, Alon Natal.
I'm a fan of all of them. Yeah, they're all absolutely great. All great
Jake
cast.
Busey, and they really do a great job. And, it's a great movie. I mean, we have a 95 audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. People love this movie. But coming out in this environment now, with a movie about Jews under attack who fight back, on the one hand, kind of makes us so relevant and should be a cultural story. And I mean, if you Google Guns N' Moses and look at news, there's 6 pages of stories about us. But on the other hand, if you go to Rotten Tomatoes, where now we always look for movies that have a higher audience score than critics score, and we have that. You know, it's still good. It's 95 audience, 73 critics.
Mm-hmm.
It's great numbers. But the relevant number is how many critic reviews we have. Because a movie like ours, with our cast, we opened in theaters this summer, and now we're going to be available everywhere: Apple, Amazon, Google. October 14th, people can watch it at home from then on. But it should have had somewhere between 100 and 200 reviews, and it only has 11. Why? And we know that the New York Times and LA Times critics watched the movie. Mm-hmm. Now, they don't watch a movie and not do a write-up. That's what they're paid to do. That's what they do. But we heard that they handed in the review and then an editor killed it. Now, why? Probably was a good review. They weren't going to kill it if it's a negative review and it was anti-Semitic publications.
Right.
Probably because it was a good review. But they just don't give it oxygen. You know, a movie like this in today's climate is off narrative. But thank God the word of mouth is really strong. And that's why we're excited to now become available, you know, everywhere people can watch it at home. And people can learn more at gunsandmosesmovie.com.
So it's shocking that the New York Times does anything against Jews. I mean, I've never heard that before.
Shocking.
Yes.
Shocking.
Yes. Incredible. Okay, I just want to ask before I thank you so much for your time today, first of all. But I do want to discuss your book quickly there too, and I'm very also curious how Christopher Lloyd was, because what a legend. You've worked with some amazing people. But let's talk about your book, Let My People Laugh: The Greatest Jewish Jokes of All Time. You mentioned it briefly before. I've had on comedians and filmmakers, so I have to ask you, in your opinion, how would you describe Jewish humor?
Jewish humor is great, because we're funny people, and we've been funny people for 3,000 years. You know, people like to mock us when they're, sort of pro-Palestinian, and the Jewish claim is that the land was given to us 3,000 years ago. Yeah, it was. We lived in that land 3,000 years ago. We fought wars of conquest from the Canaanites, who were vicious, child-sacrificing people, and like other countries in the world, fought wars and established a country and had a country in that land for 1,000 years, until 2,000 years ago. But in this long, long history, humor has always been a part of our culture. So anything that gets worked on, for a long period of time, and here we're talking thousands of years, is going to evolve and get better, and get better and better. An ancient tradition that's ongoing is going to have a lot of quality to it. So obviously there's tremendous depth of Torah study, Torah learning, but we learn in our oral tradition in the Talmud that the great sage Rabbah, whenever he would teach Torah, would open with a joke. And, says the Talmud, his students would laugh. Now, it's not because they were polite. It's because Rabbah was funny. And so this, I don't, in my book, there are 164 jokes. I wrote one of them. There's one original joke in there, but I rewrote, and adapted all of them to make it the best version for the modern ear. And what makes my book really different than other joke books is how useful it is. Because at the beginning, there are lists. These are the best jokes for a first date, for a fundraising speech, for a wedding toast, for a business lunch, for a golf outing. The kinds, it tells you which jokes are useful when you need a joke. So if you're the type of person that's going to share a joke with friends, an icebreaker, everybody appreciates a joke, and that's why I guess so many of them have gone viral from my Instagram and Facebook pages. And that's what led Skyhorse to invite us to make a book.
I always think, like, with Jewish jokes, to me always, that with other comedians, like, it's, I'm going to make fun of you. With Jewish joke comedians, like, I'm going to make fun of me. It's like more self-deprecating a lot too. That's always how I feel there too. But off the top of your head, favorite Jewish joke?
Well, I got one that's going viral right now, and it's actually not in the book because it's one I heard recently. Now people send me jokes, like, Sal, have you heard this one? Sal, have you heard this one? But it's so relevant to what we've even been talking about here. Young couple takes their little daughter to the zoo, the Bronx Zoo, and she's so excited to see the lions. And she's so tiny that when she's kind of like peering through and leaning in, she falls through the bars into the lion enclosure. Parents are freaking out. A young man who's walking by sees what's happening, climbs the fence, jumps into the lion enclosure. Lion comes running over. He punches the lion in the nose. Lion, backs up. The guy throws the daughter over the fence to the couple, and then climbs back over and saves the day. Another older man comes over and sees this and says, "You are a hero. That's incredible what you did. I saw all of it. I'm a reporter for the New York Times. This is going to be a front page story. Where did you learn how to fight like that?" "Oh, in the IDF." "Oh." And so the next day, the headline of the New York Times is, "Israeli soldier assaults lion in Bronx Zoo and steals its lunch."
Yeah, that's great. Yes. Well, but you have so many things. Guns N' Moses is going to be out by the time I post this. This will be out on all the streaming platforms. Okay, what are you working on next?
So my wife and I we're sharing content every day at Accidental Talmudist. So if people are interested to learn a little Torah, see some Jewish humor, they should look us up at Accidental Talmudist. Just Google it, or Instagram or Facebook, or our website, accidentaltalmudist.org, or the app, Accidental Talmudist. But our next picture, we're working on the script now, and that's something that you don't see. It's a biblical era movie, but it's a murder mystery. So in a city of refuge, a biblical city of refuge where the manslaughterer would flee to avoid the avenger of blood, the kind of blood feuds that existed between tribes and families in the ancient world. If he didn't do it on purpose, right, it was just negligence, he can flee. This is a Torah commandment. You create a city of refuge and he can be safe there. But he doesn't know how long he'll be there until the current high priest dies. Could be a year, could be 50 years. And so it's a city of killers. And in that city, there's a murder. And so, it falls to a young Torah scholar to solve the murder. And it's interesting because when you talk about biblical era stories, they're either Bible stories or usually war movies, the Ten Commandments or King David or something like that. But you never just see the day-to-day life, of average people, and then a murder mystery set in such a world. So we're very excited about how that's coming together.
I'm very excited. And you already kind of just answered my last question, which is how can people follow you on social media? You're all over the Accidental Talmudist on, I know, Instagram, Facebook. You're on Twitter as well?
Yes, on Twitter. It's a little bit smaller, but a Talmudist there. But much more active on Instagram. That's the main social, or just our website, accidentaltalmudist.org.
Sal, I want to thank you so much again for taking the time to speak with me today. It's been such a pleasure. I'm a fan. I've been enjoying your social media content for a long time. So I'm thankful that you took the time today. Thank you.
Jonathan, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation. Hopefully we both learned something neither knew before.
Absolutely. Well, let me sign us out. Again, this is The Jewish Lens. I'm Jonathan Rosen. Again, a very special thanks to Sal Litvak. And please like, comment, and subscribe.
Thanks for tuning in to The Jewish Lens, where all items used was strictly kosher.